The sound is what I will remember for the rest of my life. Not a crash but an explosion. A crystalline detonation that rips through the absolute silence of the house. My favorite lamp, the one with the base made of sea glass we collected on our honeymoon in Kauai, now lies in 1,000 glittering, accusing pieces on the dark hardwood floor. I'm the one who threw it, but my hands are still up, frozen in the air, trembling so violently it feels like they belong to someone else. My breath is a ragged, shallow thing, caught somewhere in my throat, refusing to go in or out. Across the room, my own husband is staring at me. Liam. And his face. His face is the most terrifying thing I have ever seen. It's a mask of perfect, impenetrable calm. His voice when he speaks is ice. It's not loud, it's not angry. It's a quiet, precise, surgical instrument, and it slices right through me. He says, "You were never supposed to wake up." There's no rage in his voice, not a single trace of panic, just a profound, chilling disappointment. It is the exact tone a brilliant scientist might use when a meticulously planned years-long experiment goes completely irrevocably off the rails at the final, critical stage. To understand how I got here, barefoot on a floor of broken glass that feels like a field of diamonds and razors, with my husband of 7 years looking at me like he's never truly seen me before. We have to rewind the clock. Just 12 hours. 12 hours ago, I was the happiest woman in the world. 12 hours is all it took for my entire life, my entire sense of self, my entire reality to fall apart. If you had asked me yesterday morning, I would have told you our life was literally perfect. I would have used that exact word, probably with a self-deprecating little laugh, but I would have meant it with every fiber of my being. Not just good, not just happy, but perfect. The kind of life you see meticulously, almost impossibly, curated on a Pinterest board. The kind that seems too good to be true and you suspect deep down that it must be. I'm Clara, a graphic designer who works from home. A job I love that gives me the freedom to live where I want. And my husband, Liam, was a wildly successful architect. A boy genius, they called him. We lived in this breathtaking house he had designed himself. A modern marvel of glass and cedar and blackened steel, nestled deep in the middle of a dense forest. It was our sanctuary, our private paradise, miles from our nearest neighbor. It was a house that invited the outside in, with floor-to-ceiling windows in every room, making you feel like you were living in the canopy of the trees. The silence at night was so complete, so profound, it felt like we were the only two people on earth. It was a silence I used to find comforting. And Liam, God, Liam was perfect. I'm not exaggerating. It felt sometimes like I had written a list of every desirable trait in a partner, and he had simply materialized from it. This was a man who seemed engineered in a lab to be the ultimate husband. He remembered the anniversary of our first date, the name of my childhood dog, Barnaby, the exact shade of cerulean blue I loved most. He brought me coffee in bed every single morning. A dark roast with a splash of oat milk, never too hot, in my favorite ceramic mug. He was handsome in a way that wasn't intimidating, just pleasant to look at, with kind eyes and a smile that seemed to reserve just for me. He was brilliant and possessed a quiet, unassuming charisma that charmed everyone, from my perpetually skeptical father to his high-powered, cutthroat clients. He was the definition of a perfect husband. Our friends were jealous, but in a sweet, aspirational way. "You two are the gold standard," my best friend Maya would say, sighing. "It gives the rest of us hope." And I believed it. I treasured it. I guarded it like the precious, fragile thing it was. But for the last few months, something had started to feel off. It's a difficult thing to even describe because the change was so subtle, so counterintuitive. It wasn't the usual story. He didn't become distant or cold or forgetful. He became more attentive. Like over the top, suffocatingly attentive. He started leaving little handwritten notes for me everywhere again. Tucked into my book, taped to my computer monitor on the bathroom mirror, just like he did when we first started dating. "You are the loveliest variable in my day. My calculations always lead back to you." It was romantic, but when I read them they felt studied, rehearsed, as if he was performing the role of devoted husband from a script. And then there was the staring. It started small. I'd be working at my desk, deep in a project, and I'd get that prickling feeling on the back of my neck, the feeling of being watched. I would look up, and he'd be standing in the doorway of my office just watching me. It wasn't the warm, adoring gaze of a loving husband. It was analytical. He looked at me like I was a fascinating, complex puzzle he was trying to solve. Or, more accurately, like a painting he was studying for flaws in the brushwork. I tried to bring it up once, casually trying to make a joke of it. "You're staring again," I said with a light laugh. He just smiled his perfect, placid smile. "I'm just appreciating the view," he'd reply smoothly, and it was such a perfect line, I felt foolish for even questioning it. I brushed it off. I told myself he was under a lot of stress from a new museum project he was designing. He was working late, poring over blueprints and complex equations until the early hours of the morning. I tried to convince myself this was just a symptom of his genius, his obsessive focus redirected onto me. I even let the darkest, most cliché fear creep into the back of my mind. Maybe he was cheating, and this over-the-top attentiveness was all a manifestation of his guilt. Oh, how I wish it had been that simple. If only. The truth was 1,000 times more insane, more terrifying than a simple, sordid betrayal. And that brings us to last night. The night my entire world didn't just crack. It exploded into cosmic dust. Liam announced he was making a special dinner, a surprise. He sent me for a long walk in the woods, telling me not to come back for at least an hour. When I returned, the house was filled with the scent of garlic and saffron and white wine. He had cooked my absolute favorite meal, a complex seafood cioppino that takes hours to prepare, and that he hadn't made for me in years. We opened a bottle of expensive Barolo, the kind we saved for major celebrations. He sat across from me, his eyes sparkling in the candlelight, looking at me with an intensity that felt like the first weeks of our love. He told me he loved me more than anything in the universe. Felt like a movie. Felt like a dream. It felt like he was trying to win me over all over again. Then, after dinner, as we were clearing the plates, he said he had one more surprise. He went to his meticulously organized bar cart and began mixing a cocktail. "A new recipe I've been working on," he said, a little too brightly, handing me a beautiful heavy crystal glass. "A variation on your favorite. I think you'll love it." It was a Negroni, my go-to, but the scent of gin was almost overwhelming. It was incredibly strong. I took a sip and coughed. I laughed and said, "Wow, you're trying to get me drunk tonight." He just smiled that perfect smile again. "Just want you to relax completely," he said. "You've been so stressed lately. Just let go." I drank all of it. Of course I did. Why wouldn't I? This was Liam, the man I trusted with my life. The man who designed our home to keep me safe. The last thing I remember clearly is feeling a sudden tidal wave of dizziness, a pleasant heavy warmth spreading through my limbs like liquid lead. The room, the candlelight, his face. It all started to tilt and swirl together. Liam was there in an instant, his arms around me, scooping me up as if I weighed nothing. "I've got you," he whispered, his voice in my ear. I passed out almost instantly, my head falling against his chest, feeling completely, utterly safe in my husband's embrace, being carried to my own bed in my own perfect home. It was the last time I would ever feel safe again. The first thing I felt when I started to surface from the blackness was just wrong. It wasn't a thought, it wasn't a sensory input. It was a deep, primal, cellular feeling of wrongness that started in my gut and spread like ice through my veins. Everything was off. The air in the room felt different, heavier, stagnant. It smelled weird. The familiar, comforting scent of my husband's sandalwood and bergamot body wash, a scent I associated with safety and home, was gone. In its place was a generic, cheap, cloying fresh sports scent. The kind of deodorant a teenager would buy. It was the smell of a stranger. My brain, still thick with a fog I couldn't understand, was screaming at me. "Wake up. Something is wrong. Wake up now." Then I felt it. A physical presence. An arm draped heavily over my waist. It was too heavy. The muscles were too dense, too coiled. Liam was lean, an architect whose work was in his mind and his hands, not a bodybuilder. My own hand, moving almost of its own accord as if it were a separate, smarter entity, brushed against the hand resting on my hip. It was too big. The fingers were thick and blunt, the palm rough and calloused in a way Liam's elegant, long-fingered hands were not. The person sleeping next to me in my bed was not my husband. I was in my own bed, in my own bedroom, in my own secluded house in the middle of nowhere, next to a complete and total stranger. I squeezed my eyes shut, my heart beginning to hammer against my ribs like a trapped bird trying to break free. Please be a nightmare. Please, please, just let this be a twisted, awful dream caused by that too strong cocktail. But it was real. The slow, deep guttural breathing on the back of my neck was real. The solid, unfamiliar weight of the body pressed against mine was real. I forced my eyes to open just a crack, my lashes wet. My gaze dropped down to the hand on my hip. There was a ring on his finger. A thick silver band with some kind of Celtic knot design that glinted faintly in the sliver of moonlight coming through the gap in the curtains. It was not Liam's simple, elegant, modern platinum wedding band. It was not Liam's hand. Panic. Absolute, pure, mind-shattering panic. It was a physical force, a wave that crashed over me and short-circuited my entire nervous system. My lungs seized. I couldn't get any air. My mind was a chaotic storm of incoherent questions. Where is Liam? Is he okay? Is he hurt? Is he even in the house? Did this guy do something to him? Did he hurt me? I couldn't remember anything after Liam carried me to bed. The memory was just a black hole. My body was frozen, paralyzed by a terror so profound it felt like a physical weight pressing me into the mattress. But beneath the tidal wave of fear, a single clear, impossible thought emerged. I had to complete the most difficult, most terrifying challenge of my entire life. I had to get out of this bed without waking this man up. I began to move 1 millimeter at a time. It was an exercise in pure, agonizing concentration. Every nerve ending was on fire. I knew every sound this old house made, every groan of the floorboards, every specific creak of the mattress springs. I could map this room in the dark. I lifted my head from the pillow, a glacial movement that felt like it took an hour. I began the impossibly slow, torturous process of sliding my legs toward the edge of the bed, away from the heat of his body. The stranger shifted behind me. A deep groan. I froze instantly. My blood turned to ice. My ears were ringing with a high-pitched keen of pure fear. He mumbled something in his sleep, some incoherent phrase, and rolled slightly away from me, his breathing deepening again into a low snore. That was too close. My heart was a drum solo in the silent room. It was now or never. I had to get out. Now. Somehow, through some reserve of adrenaline I never knew I possessed, I completed the impossible. I slid out of the bed, my body moving with a liquid stealth I never knew I was capable of. My bare feet finally touched the cold, solid hardwood floor. The shock of the cold was grounding. I was out. I was free. I stood up, my entire body shaking so violently my teeth were chattering audibly. I hugged myself, trying to contain the tremors. I looked at the bedroom door just 20 feet away. It felt like a mile. But it was freedom. It was safety. It was an escape. And that's when I saw him. In the darkest corner of the room, partially obscured by the long, deep shadow of a tall bookshelf, there was a silhouette. Person. Standing. Perfectly. Still. My first thought, a fresh, even more potent wave of terror crashing over me, was, there are two of them. I'm done for. It was an accomplice. They trapped me. My heart, which I thought couldn't possibly beat any faster, felt like it was about to explode out of my chest. This is it. This is how I die. In my own bedroom in my perfect house. But then the figure moved his head, just a slight, deliberate tilt, and a sliver of moonlight slid across the planes of his face. It was Liam, my husband, standing in the corner of our bedroom, not tied up, not hurt, not bleeding, not gagged, just watching. This single image was 100 times more terrifying than waking up next to a stranger. This broke my brain. It shattered my entire reality into a million pieces. The man I loved, my protector, my partner, my other half, was standing there like he was watching a movie. Like he was a spectator at a play. I tried to scream his name, to call out to him, but nothing came out. My throat was clamped shut with an iron fist of disbelief. I just stared at him, my eyes wide with a desperate, silent plea. Do something. Help me. Say something. What is happening? He just stood there. His expression was completely, unnervingly blank. His eyes moved from me, trembling by the wall, to the large sleeping man in our bed, and then back to me. There was no fear. There was no confusion. There was no anger. Nothing. It was the calm, detached, curious face of a scientist observing a lab rat in a maze it has never seen before. I finally managed to force a single word from my lips, a choked, broken, pathetic whisper. Liam. He didn't answer. He didn't even look at me. He took a slow, deliberate step towards the bed, not towards me. He was moving to position himself between me and my only escape route, the door. I was trapped, utterly and completely trapped between a stranger in my bed and my completely terrifyingly insane husband. Then a sound from downstairs. A floorboard creaked. It was so loud in the suffocating silence of the house it sounded like a gunshot. I flinched, my eyes darting towards the door. Then back to Liam, my mind screaming for answers, for any semblance of logic in this nightmare. All the fear, all the terror, all the confusion that had frozen me in place, it all flash evaporated and was replaced by a white-hot purifying rage. The stranger, whose name is apparently Alex, sits up fully now, his brow furrowed, looking back and forth between us. Man, I thought you said she was going to be at her sister's for the weekend. Boom. The final piece of the puzzle slammed into place with the force of a physical impact. This wasn't just a lie, it was a conspiracy. An entire masterpiece of deception, meticulously constructed by the man I had built my entire life around. I turned my full attention, my full focus to Liam. I ignored the other man completely. My voice when I spoke was no longer a whisper. It was low and dangerous and vibrating with a fury I didn't know I possessed. Explain, I said. Now. He sighed. He actually let out a long, weary, put-upon sigh, as if I were a particularly slow student who had just failed the easiest test in the world. It was an experiment, Clara, he said, his voice still unbelievably, maddeningly calm. A stress test. A variable introduction into a controlled system to measure baseline emotional response. A what? The words were just noise. Jargon. They made zero sense. They were the words of a madman. He finally looked directly at me then, and for the first time I saw a flicker of something other than calm in his eyes. It wasn't love. It wasn't remorse. It was a blazing, fanatical intensity. The look of a true believer. Our relationship. All modern relationships. They're built on a fragile foundation of routine and assumption. Predictability. I wanted to see what would happen when that system was subjected to the ultimate stressor. The ultimate perceived betrayal. I needed to see if you would default to your primary programming, run to me, your designated protector. I needed to see if our bond was a genuine psycho-emotional connection, or simply a construct of habit and social convenience. He was talking about our marriage, our life, our love like it was some kind of graduate thesis project. My mind reeled back to the cocktail, the heavy, unnatural chemical sleep. You drugged me, I whispered, the accusation tasting like poison on my tongue. And you will not believe this, but he actually looked offended. His face hardened. I sedated you, he corrected, his tone sharp and condescending as if I had used the wrong term in a scientific paper. Lightly. The initial shock of the scenario had to be pure, untainted by the memory of you resisting or a struggle. It was crucial for the integrity of the experiment that your initial response was to the tableau itself. I completely lost it. My life wasn't a lie, it was a laboratory. My home wasn't a sanctuary, it was a petri dish. My husband wasn't my partner, he was the lead scientist and I was his test rat. Without a single coherent thought in my head, my body acted on pure primal instinct. I reached for the lamp on the bedside table, the beautiful sea glass lamp he had bought me for our 3rd anniversary, and I hurled it with all my strength, not at him, but against the wall beside him. It exploded into a million glittering pieces, the sound echoing the shattering of my own reality. And that's when he said the most chilling thing I have ever heard in my entire life. He didn't look at me. He didn't flinch. He looked at the wreckage of the broken lamp on the floor, a small frown of clinical frustration on his face. You were never supposed to wake up. Alex was scrambling out of the bed now, grabbing for his jeans on the floor. Liam, this is insane, he yelled, his voice cracking with a panic I knew all too well. You told me she was a willing participant. You said this was some kind of elaborate role-play thing. You said she signed papers, for God's sake. Liam didn't even look at him. He just kept staring at me, his eyes cold and assessing. He wasn't seeing his wife anymore. He was seeing a contaminated experiment. A failed result. A flaw in the data that had rendered years of work useless. My mistake, he said, almost to himself. The observer effect. The observation variable was compromised. You seeing me broke the whole paradigm. The data is corrupt. In that moment, standing amidst the glittering ruins of a lamp and a marriage, I saw the absolute truth with a horrifying clarity. The man I had loved and married, the man I had shared a bed with for 7 years, was a monster. But not a monster of passion or rage, not the kind you read about in cheap thrillers. He was something far more twisted, far more insidious. A monster of pure, cold, detached intellect. A man so consumed by his own arrogance that he believed he had the right to play God with the lives and hearts of those around him. Alex was already at the door, fumbling to pull on his shoes, his face pale with horror and sweat. "I'm out," he stammered, not looking at Liam. "I'm out. I'm going to the police, Liam. I swear to God, I'll tell them everything." He actually paused then and looked at me, and his eyes were filled with genuine pathetic remorse. "I'm so sorry," he said to me, his voice a hoarse whisper. "He lied to me about everything. He showed me emails. He said you knew. He said you were excited about it. And Liam? He didn't even try to stop him. He didn't threaten him. He just watched Alex hurry out of the room with a flicker of mild annoyance on his face, as if he were disappointed that his lab assistant had lost his nerve. The experiment was over, and the cleanup was just an inconvenient, tedious postscript. I didn't wait around for the sequel. A cold, hard certainty settled in my chest. I had never been more clear about anything in my entire life. Without taking my eyes off Liam, I moved deliberately to the dresser. I grabbed my keys from the wooden bowl, my phone, and I didn't even bother to look for shoes. I walked right past him, my head held high, my bare feet crunching on the tiny, sharp fragments of broken glass. I barely felt the sting. The physical pain was nothing, a distant echo compared to the cataclysm in my soul. For a split second as I passed him, I thought he might reach out, try to stop me, try to explain more with his twisted logic. But he just stepped aside, granting me a clear path to the door as if holding it open for a guest. He just watched me go. His grand experiment had failed, and now he was simply observing the fallout, taking mental notes for his next, more refined attempt. I ran. I didn't walk, I ran out of that house, that beautiful custom-built prison he had the audacity to call our sanctuary, and I never once looked back. I got in my car, the engine roaring to life in the dead quiet of the forest, a violent, welcome noise. And I just drove. I had no destination, no plan, no wallet. I just drove away from the man who was a stranger and the life that was a lie. So it's been 2 years. The divorce is done. It was a cold, clinical, horrifying process. He didn't fight me on the division of assets. He fought me on the narrative. His legal arguments, delivered through his lawyers, were as detached and soulless as his experiment. He claimed it was a non-traditional therapeutic exercise that I had verbally consented to and then forgotten. He tried to have me psychologically evaluated. The house is gone, sold off. I couldn't bear to look at another photo of it, that glass box that had become my cage. I now live in a tiny, anonymous apartment in a completely different city, surrounded by the constant, ambient noise of strangers, traffic, sirens, music from other apartments. And I find it strangely, deeply comforting. Silence is no longer a friend. And yes, I'm in therapy. A lot of therapy. I'm trying to learn how to trust people again, but more importantly, how to trust my own judgment, my own perception of reality. When someone so close to you can warp your world so completely, you begin to doubt everything, especially yourself. So much harder than you think. I still can't sleep most nights. Every little noise in my apartment building, a footstep in the hall, a door closing down the way, the elevator dinging, makes my heart seize in my chest. I check the 3 locks on my door 4, 5, 6 times before I can even think about lying down in the dark. He didn't just break my heart and destroy my marriage. He rewired my brain for fear. He didn't just make me afraid of strangers. He made me afraid of getting close to anyone. Now, I'm always looking for the flaw in the facade, the angle, the hidden agenda, because I know that the ones who seem the most perfect, the most flawless, are often the ones with the biggest, most terrifying secrets. My husband wasn't a monster pretending to be a man. He was a man who genuinely thought he was a god, and our entire 7-year life together was nothing more than his twisted, elaborate game. He didn't see love or partnership or connection. He saw a system to be analyzed, an experiment to be manipulated and controlled. And the craziest, most chilling part of it all? For 7 years I was his perfect little test subject and I had absolutely no idea. Trust is everything. It's the invisible foundation of every relationship we have. So what would you do if the person you loved most in the world did this to you? How would you ever recover? Let me know your honest thoughts in the comments right now. And if you want to hear more insane, true stories like this, smash that like button and subscribe.